who I will introduce, and super excited, and a guided meditation session. So a little bit about Dave. Dave is a retired psychotherapist and is fully certified as an MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor, by the University of Massachusetts Medical School, where MBSR was founded by John Kabat-Zinn. The free online MBSR course he created in 2013, Halus Mindfulness, is based on an 8-week in-person program, MBSR class that he taught for 12 years. And now it's online. Halus Mindfulness is 100% free and has over 3,000 graduates, over 70 countries. And I think that number has increased now, right, Dave?
Well, by a few.
So welcome. Thank you so much. And, you know, Dave and I have developed a friendship since the Mindfulness Summit back in February, and it's just been so great to attend his graduate meetings and have like our monthly calls together, and it's just been a huge pleasure. So thank you for participating in this online self-love day with me again, and I'm grateful to have you here.
Well, good to be here. You know, I was thinking about what it was that, you know, it's funny, when we first started talking about this, I was thinking it was an interview, and then I saw on the schedule it was a talk, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to prepare a talk. And I was going to tell you that let's just do an interview, but I put together something, and I think maybe this will work okay. And I was thinking about new meditators, you know, and how new meditators are often so hard on themselves. That's not just new meditators, sometimes experienced meditators. You know, so many of us are perfectionists. You know, we want things to be great, and we start meditation. Many of us wanting wonderful and amazing things to happen in meditation, want to get really good at it. But ironically, this is actually an obstacle to getting to where we want to be. There's a story, you might have heard this story, about a new student asking his Zen master, so if I work hard, really hard, how long will it take me to become enlightened? And the master looks up at him, looks him up and down, and he says, well, it's 10 years. The student is shocked by this, and he says, I mean, if I really work at it, how long? And the Zen master says, I'm sorry, I misjudged, 20 years. He says, wait, I'm going to work on it day.
Dave, you're muted.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So you got to watch my lips flap for a little while.
I hear him.
You could, but I saw myself muted, so I'm going to, I think, Lauren, could you hear me? Lauren's listening to this too. So I'm just going to start again. It was just a few minutes in case others missed it too. And I was just saying that some new meditators and often some experienced meditators are really hard on themselves. You know, many of us are perfectionists, and some of us have a lot of this and some of us a little. And we want to achieve big and wonderful things in meditation, want to get really, really good at it. And this is actually, ironically, an obstacle for getting to where we want to be. There's the story of the new student asking his Zen master, if I work hard, really hard, how long will it take me to become enlightened? And the Zen master looks him up and down, and he says, well, 10 years. A student is shocked by this, and he says, I mean, if I really work at it, how long? The Zen master says, well, I'm sorry, I misjudged, 20 years. He says, wait, if I work at day and night, he says, in that case, 30 years. Now, so many new meditators think they're doing it wrong. They think that if they have thoughts come up or difficult things come up, and they ask themselves, how do I get rid of these? And the answer, surprising to many new meditators, is that you don't. And if you try, you're only going to make things worse, creating new, even more troublesome cascade thoughts and feelings. And those thoughts and feelings are about trying to stop the original thoughts and feelings you're trying to stop. Sanru Suzuki, author of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, he says, in meditation, what you should do is leave your front door and your back door open. Let thoughts come and go, just don't serve them tea. And I just today got a letter from a new graduate from Norway, And she writes this. She says, as a person, I am performance-oriented, conscientious, and hardworking by nature. I work hard and purposefully, really without taking so many breaks or making plans to have fun. And here she's describing how hard she is on herself. And through this course, I've learned to discover without judging, without striving, without needing to do anything about it. Kind of an inside meeting with myself. I learned to go into my own body, discover feelings just as they are, without judging and denying what I don't like or what's been difficult or sore. Now I acknowledge both what's hurting and what's good in my life. The course has given me more than anything that I've tried before, and just at the beginning of a road that finally feels right for me. So you can, getting letters like this, it might help you to understand how I can do this for free, not asking for any payment. So I really think that the biggest hurdle with meditation isn't just understanding that thoughts and other difficulties come and go, but it's how we treat ourselves at that moment when we discover things aren't going the way we want them to. Normally, we're not very kind to ourselves at that point because we don't like what we've seen. We become rigid and try to push the bad feelings away, which only makes things worse, because now we not only feel bad, we feel bad about feeling bad. And this, of course, is the opposite of self-compassion. If this happens every time we notice something we don't like, which for many of us is much of the time, then meditation and life will be very frustrating. And when I work with somebody, a new meditator, the first thing I want them to know is meditation isn't about stopping thoughts. It's not about stopping uncomfortable experiences. That the most important practice in the beginning is to notice at that moment when you treat yourself, you discover you're encountering something you don't like, notice how you're treating yourself. That's where the real practice comes in, to learn to be gentle and kind with yourself, even then when difficult things come up. And here sometimes people think, when I tell them that, think I'm just being nice and being soft and forgiving for a new meditator. But I'm actually wanting to recognize that it's a reality that doesn't go away even for an experienced meditator, even a master meditator. Sometimes I say that the course isn't about getting to the point where you feel peaceful all the time. It's about learning it's possible to be at peace without feeling peaceful. I'm going to say this again because it's a little counterintuitive. It sounds contradictory. It's possible to be at peace with not feeling peaceful. This might not sound like terribly good news, but once you've experienced this, it's incredibly liberating because then you don't have to control things. There's a place to be with anything that comes up. Barbara Coloroso is a parenting teacher, and Lauren and I took a class from her when we had our daughter, when she was very young. And she'd always say at the end of her trainings, she's I'm going to give you some last minute instructions for you new parents. She'd say, I want you to spend 30 minutes a day with the one person you'll be with the rest of your life. Of course, we're all thinking it's our spouse. She says, no, not your spouse, because they may go before you. I want you to spend 30 minutes a day with yourself. For some meditation students, that's a really precious discovery, and a lot of them do discover that at a point. But in the beginning, the fact that they're with themselves, alone with themselves, is not good news. It's not a gift, it's a problem, which is why meditation is sometimes difficult for a new meditator until they learn that important skill of how to be with themselves in this new way. I was telling Lauren earlier, I had a client once who said something to me I often hear as a therapist. She said, Dave, if you knew the real me, you wouldn't like me. In one of our early sessions, and she was an amazing person. I mean, she was funny, she was articulate, she was actually fun to be with, and not all my clients were fun to be with. And she was telling me about a trip she took up north with some friends. And she said, almost as an afterthought, she says, they think they like me. And I was a little incredulous because I come to know her as such a delightful, intelligent, and interesting person to be with. And I said, you mean they really don't like you, but they think they do? And she laughed, and I laughed, how ridiculous that sounded. I don't usually, when I was doing clinical work, I didn't usually give my clients homework. But this time I did. I asked her, I said, is there anybody in your life that you really do trust them when they say they like you? She says, well, yeah, my daughter and my husband, I believe them when they say they like me. They wouldn't be with me if they didn't. And I said, here's your homework. So go home, and between now and next time we meet, I want you to ask them what they like and love about you. Have them make a list that you bring back to me next time. So when she came back with the list the next time, I asked her, I said, did you believe them? And she said, yes, I did believe them. And she got a little teary. And I could see that something had shifted in her. And that's a reminder to me that if you can't love yourself because you have too many flaws, then you're not letting anybody else love you either, because you wouldn't trust them. How could they know these things about you? And we all have parts of us we don't like. The sound of our own voice, the way we look in photos, something about our personality. I always thought I was not outgoing enough or charismatic enough or clever enough. Yeah, you've seen the bumper sticker. I want to be the person my dog thinks I am. And I just read something in the Tricycle magazine, just said, maybe the bumper sticker had it wrong. So maybe you already are the person your dog thinks you are. It's just that only your dog can see it.
Mm.
I remember the movie Meet Joe Black, where Brad Pitt and Anthony Hopkins are starring it, and Brad Pitt plays the angel of death, and Anthony Hopkins is the successful entrepreneur. And there's Quince, who's sort of a schlub. He's the son-in-law. And he says at one point to Joe, the Brad Pitt angel of death character, he says something he just discovered in a deep way. He says, love is when they know the worst thing about you and love you anyway. Love is when they know the worst thing about you and love you anyway. And when I watched the movie for the first time, I wanted to be the Brad Pitt character, wise, charming, handsome, or the Anthony Hopkins character, smart, successful, charismatic. But watching it a second time, something shifted for me, and I realized I'd never be Brad Pitt or Anthony Hopkins. But I could be, and maybe in some ways I already was, Quince. Well, although he was a bit of a bumbler, he loved the people around him unconditionally. And the people around him sensed that. And maybe I could be that. Maybe I already was that. And that was really liberating for me. There's a wonderful poem by Derek Walcott called Love After Love. He writes, the time will come when with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life. Isn't that beautiful? So I thought about doing a meditation with all of you, a loving kindness meditation, and we will do one, but I've modified it a little bit for the theme. It's be about maybe a 10, 15 minute meditation or so. So wherever you are, just make yourself comfortable. You don't really need to change your posture, just noticing how it is for you right now. And you can have your eyes open or shut for this. And sensing where you are right now, where you are emotionally in your life, where you are physically, letting yourself feel the support you have from the floor, how your feet are making contact with the floor. sensations of contact and of weight with your body and the chair or the couch. Feeling your arms and how they're resting along your side or hands resting in your lap. Beginning to feel the movement of your breath, the actual sensations of breathing. Reminding yourself that you're here, alive, you're whole, breathing. Letting your breath just be the breath that it already is. In this kind of meditation, we don't try to change the breath, but just bring awareness to it, a gentle awareness. Observing it the same way you might observe the waves at the seashore. You know how you watch the waves come out and go back in. You don't say to yourself, I wish they were faster or slower, or they were higher or shallower. You just watch. See if you experience your breath the same way. Breath goes out and it comes back in on its own. Nothing you have to do to make your breath different. You're breathing fine. And we can take a minute just to do that. And when you're ready, sing if you can recall a time when you felt like you really belonged. Not because you were the same as everybody else, or especially clever or engaging, but simply because you were you. It could be a time with family, or a close group of friends, or sports teammates, a volunteer group, or maybe one of those 2 a.m. conversations where time just stops and disappears. This would be a time when there's almost no self-consciousness because you knew you were accepted exactly the way you are. No one needed or wanted you to be any different than you already were. And as you recall this time, see if you remember it in detail, where you were, when this was, who you were with. Imagining it vividly, almost like you were there again. And notice what happens inside as you recall this time, whether it's one person or several other people or group. And there may be several times when you felt like you really belonged that came up for you. If those come up, letting yourself re-experience those as well. Now seeing if you can recall a particular person who you know or you've known in your life to be loving and kind to you. Someone who easily evokes feelings of warmth and love. It could be a grandparent, a spouse, or a partner, your mom or dad, or aunt or uncle. A mentor or a close friend, someone who's been good to you, helps or has helped you feel safe and whole, who appreciates you and loves or has loved you without reservation or condition. And if a person, past or present, doesn't come up, for you. Maybe someone who you know to be inspirational might come. Someone it's easy to imagine that they could say to you the following, that they would say to you. Imagine them saying to you now. They say, I love you exactly as you are. And I wish that you have love, warmth, and affection in your life. I wish for you that you be protected from harm and free from fear. I wish that you be alive, engaged, and joyful. And most of all, they say to you, I wish you experience inner peace and ease. And as you imagine them saying these things to you, imagining that they're right here with you now, very close to you. You can almost feel their presence. Noticing the feelings that move in you as you're with them, and you remember their reassuring voice. And maybe an awareness of how it is for them to know that you're receiving their love and good wishes. You may also notice feelings of gratitude towards them, so letting those feelings come too. Letting those feelings wash over you, letting feelings of love and safety, if they can, letting them grow in you. And knowing that there's nothing you had to do to deserve this, that these wishes were and are given freely without condition. Now, letting someone you care about come to mind. Could be a child, a family member, a niece or nephew, a dear friend, even a loved pet. Imagining them close to you now, feeling their presence, and saying to them, I love you exactly as you are, and hope for you that you have love, warmth, and affection in your life. I wish for you that you be protected from harm and free from fear. And you say to your loved one that you be alive, engaged, and joyful. That you wish for them to experience inner peace and ease. And letting yourself really notice and explore these feelings of kind of unconditional love you have for somebody or someone. Letting them kind of wash over you. And knowing it's not a one-way street. They probably have similar feelings for you. Now, when you're ready, seeing if it's possible to imagine saying these things to a younger you as a child or many years ago before you knew what you know now. You were younger, less experienced. And now you're coming back into your life at a younger time, seeing your younger self in front of you and saying these loving wishes in the same way you did a moment ago for someone you love. But this time to the younger you, from you as you are now, the future you to that younger person. And you say to this younger you, I love you exactly as you are and wish that you have love and warmth and affection in your life. I wish for you that you be protected from harm and free from fear. I wish for you that you be alive, engaged, and joyful in your life. And most of all, I wish you experience inner peace and ease. You might even sense, as you're saying this, how you shifted back and forth from the person saying these, this future person, the present person, to this younger person who's receiving them. With you both sending and receiving these wishes for safety, happiness, and peace. And taking a moment now to experience how this affects the younger you, being visited by an older, wiser, more experienced you. And for the younger you, how it might have felt to be visited by a future you who could be that reassuring and loving. Now taking a moment to let all of this sink in, you receiving love and good wishes from those who love or loved you. You sending good wishes and love to those you care about. And you sending love and good wishes to the younger you. And sending and receiving to and from yourself in that strange way. And there may even be a part of you that has resisted parts of the experience. And knowing that this is okay too. And as practice, we can let our experience just be exactly what it is. And as you sit there, taking a few moments, noticing how this is working in you, taking some time to appreciate and feel what's been generated through this practice. And even if there have been difficult parts, knowing that this may sink in over time to increase your own sense of aliveness, of acceptance, of belonging. Now, when you're ready, bring awareness to your physical presence, feeling again how your feet are making contact with the floor, how your body's supported by the chair or the couch. Bring awareness to breath, letting your breath just be breath. And now, in your own time, if your eyes have been closed, letting them gently open. coming back to this group experience. I sometimes tell students who have finished graduating from the course, when they tell me that one of the things they learned is self-compassion, for many of them is the thing that they learned that was most important. And I reflect that back, that I think too that it's the most important component of the entire course. That any meditator, even experienced meditators, even the masters, have distractions and life difficulties that come up during meditation and at other times. And when this happens, and in life, it's important to treat them not as problems, but seeing if you can see them as visitors, not permanent residents. And to realize at the moment you recognize the distraction or difficulty, that this is a visitor, that this is actually a moment of awakening to that fact. And there's a poem, if any of you have taken an MBSR course, the instructors are fond of this. John Kabat-Zinn used to use this poem when he taught the course from Rumi called The Guest House. And Rumi says, this being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. And he says, welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. This guest may be clearing you out for some new delight. I'll say this again. This guest may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Sometimes I have students have trouble with that because it sees as a negative thing. But imagine if that was possible, if you could accept even the difficult things coming in as potential gifts, as hard as it might be at the moment. You know, when Stephen Colbert was still doing the Colbert Report, he interviewed Dan Harris, author of 10% Happier. And Dan actually led Colbert in a meditation on air. Kind of amazing he did that. So the audience and Colbert and everybody listening is supposed to be meditating with him. And afterwards, Colbert talked about how he kept catching his mind flitting off here and there. And he says that seemed like a problem to him. And Harris said this to him. He says, you know, each time you do this, even if it happens 100 times, you think that's 100 times you failed, but that's 100 times you've awakened. 100 times you've broken a lifelong habit. And he said, that's a time for congratulation, not self-flagellation. Isn't that beautiful? So Eureka, that's everything I had planned. And now we have a little bit of time left over, maybe 10 minutes or so, where you and I can just chat a little bit, and anything that might have come up for you or you want to ask about, we can
Yeah, for sure. Actually, sorry if it caused you to prepare, but it was perfect. I actually had some questions prepared for us, so I guess that we have some time to talk about that. So, you know, being that today is a self-love day, I was wondering if you could define in your words like what self-love means to you from like a very, you know, like because you're a mindfulness teacher, from a mindfulness perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, for me, it just means first it's the to not to do the negative, which is being self-critical, you know, which I do from time to time. And you know, as I was preparing this thing, thinking I had to prepare a talk, you know, at first I said, oh my gosh, got to prepare a talk. And I don't know how it is for you writing something, but for me, when all the way through undergraduate school, I thought I hated writing. I was convinced of it because everything I wrote, I hated, you know, and that's because I had to use a typewriter, you know, and I'd write it out and I said, oh, I don't quite like that. So I write another one. I didn't quite like that. And I write a third one and the fourth one, if I got that far and it's not 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was so sick of it that I just would turn it in, never liking it. And with the computers and word processors, I discovered that I'm really like about a 10 or 12 or 15 draft writer. And by the time I got to the 15th draft, and this is true for me in preparing for this, oh, that's really not bad. It's really okay. So for me, self-love means it's getting through that part where you have these negative views of yourself, staying with yourself long enough to recognize what it is that is that you do love about yourself, like I did with that Brad Pitt movie. And I saw it a second time and said, I love that Quint's character, and he's more like me than Brad Pitt, and I'm like Brad Pitt or Anthony Hopkins. So for me, it's that, and it's treating myself like I would a good friend. That's what it is when it's working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. This question I thought of because this is a little complex, but we could definitely expand or go wherever it flows with this. But what are some of the, I guess, consequences of not having self-love? Because, we talk so much about like, oh, self-love is important. This whole day we've been talking about these are the benefits and this is how. But I'm wondering if you can talk almost on the shadow aspect of like what do we suffer? How do we suffer in different ways? How does our relationship suffer? How do we suffer? How does like our different aspects of our lives suffer when we don't have self-love, and how does that show up?
Not in particularly good ways, I guess. And because we don't like ourselves, we're unhappy with ourselves, we're often not nice to people around us. Because we're just not feeling good about ourselves. But there's the flip side of that too. There's one of the three marks of existence that Buddhism teaches. There's suffering, and there's impermanence, and then there's this concept of no self, which John Kabat-Zinn used to. He had his own way of saying this. He said his way of saying these three truths: suffering and impermanence and no self. He'd say first, shit happens. Second, everything changes, and third, it's not about you anyway. That's what this. And as we reflected on that first about suffering, if we never had suffering in our lives, where would compassion come from? Where would understanding and wisdom come from? It's actually the suffering is actually the bed from which we learn those things. So that's not something that's easy to remember when you're having critical thoughts about yourself or feeling bad about things. And sometimes for me, I'm not able to fully invest myself in the thought that this is a good thing, because it doesn't feel like a good thing. But intellectually, I can know it might be helpful later on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an acronym that a friend of mine once taught me. It's AFLO. It's an AFLO experience. Another effing learning opportunity.
Love that.
When it happens, you don't like it. No matter how evolved you are, it's uncomfortable. You don't want to be there. But if some part of you can remember that at some point this may be a valuable experience, that can help you get through that. So that.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. You've talked about that before, and
Yeah.
every single time you say it, it just makes me laugh because it's a very practical approach in today's, world, like that phrasing of it.
Yeah.
One thing that came into my mind was when we understand, I think, intellectually how important self-love is, and yet we don't make the time to actually really like fill our our self-love tank. I think one of the places that it shows up is in relationships. You are not able to show up to be the best mother or partner or a spouse or coworker when you are not able to give yourself that self-love, right? And that's something that kind of came up for me of like why it's so important, and what happens when we don't have that self-love. We're not taking care of ourselves and giving ourselves that 30-minute time to yourself per day or however long you need, then maybe throughout the day we become more impatient with our children, or we're just kind of snappy or annoyed, and we just don't show up to be the best versions of ourselves. So that's why I think it's so important to make it a practice. And I say practice
Yeah,
because it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do like 30 minutes in one chunk of
right.
time, but
Yeah.
like just the general practice of being kind to ourselves, like noticing our thoughts.
Yeah, and even being kind to yourself when you're not being kind to yourself. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
those of us who are invested in practice and in this kind of work, and when we catch ourselves not being kind to ourselves, there can be another voice that says, "Don't do that."
Mhm.
Be nice to yourself, and that just creates another layer on top, which is so it's seeing if it's possible just to allow that to be as it is, knowing that comes up. I know now from a number of times preparing talks and preparing writing things that I'm going to go through that period of where I don't like what I'm writing or what I'm doing. But I also know that it will work out. Uh,
Mhm.
but I don't pretend that I'm feeling good about it because I don't. It still feels bad. But there's some part of me says, well, it'll get better. It'll be all right. Or if I'm
Mhm.
having something that's really not going well with the group, sometimes when I would be presenting with the group, and I think I'd have this thought, John Kabat-Zinn would do this a lot better than I'm doing right now. There's a part of me that remembers that that's a recurrent thought. I've had that thought before. And also recognizes that what will probably happen is when it's over and the next day, and I get some feedback back and find out that it wasn't really horrible, uh, that it was really okay. Just knowing that intellectually can help.
Mhm. Yeah, we had a question from the chat. Is self-love different than self-acceptance?
That's a great question. Well, it depends on your definition of acceptance. If your definition of acceptance is um, I like myself and I don't need to change, and it's okay if I stay exactly the same way forever. Uh, if acceptance means begrudgingly accepting who you are and not liking it, then that's different. Uh, but if acceptance means accepting yourself the same way you would accept someone who you loved and cared about, who has different ideas than you and different experiences than you, and they're not exactly the way you'd want them to be, but you love them just the same. Then I'd say they're similar. But it's a tricky area because sometimes people say, I don't really want to accept myself because I want to improve. I want to get better. I don't want to be accepting. And this kind of acceptance actually creates the grounds for change, where you would be loving towards yourself. There's something that Carl Rogers said once. He said, when I accept myself as I actually am, then I can change. It's paradoxical. There's a whole therapy built up on this concept. It's called dialectical behavior therapy by Marsha Linehan. She was one of the first to put mindfulness explicitly in therapy. And the dialectical part is believing two things that seem opposite. And the main dialectic of her work was, you are okay exactly as you are. You don't need to change. There's no need to change. You're perfect as you are. And the other dialectic is, change is possible. You can change from where you are now. Things can get better for you. And if you have one and not the other, it's imbalanced. If you say, you're okay exactly as you are, nothing needs to change, everything's okay, don't do anything, that's kind of nothing's going to happen if there's a fear that nothing will happen if you really believe that, and you just wind up doing nothing. You just kind of sit in front of a TV and eat carton after carton of Ben and Jerry's. Or the opposite, change is possible, and you can change in this way. If you put too much attention on that, then it's too stressful, it's too striving, there's too much kind of grinding in it. So her whole theory is based on holding both of those possibilities. You are okay as you are. That's how she treated her clients. And there's possibility for change. So in that sense, acceptance and change don't have to be contradictory.
Yeah, the practical like analogy that came across my mind was if self-acceptance is let's say you're working on losing weight or your weight, right? So self-acceptance would be like the scale, being able to stand on the scale and like look to see exactly where you are. And self-love would be like the end goal of like maybe losing 10 pounds, and having that parallel, I think, might make sense for some people. So like self-acceptance is just, do you have the courage to look at yourself, to actually evaluate where you stand, right? And then from that place, now you know where where you need to go and what that gap is. But if you
Yeah,
don't even have the courage to step on the scale to say, okay, how much do I actually weigh? Then you have nowhere to go in terms of like, this is my goal.
exactly. And what's important to remember, maybe the most important part of this is the love is not just the love of who you are when you're weighing more than you want to weigh, or the love of who you would be when you weigh less. It's loving both. So even when you lose the weight you think you want to lose, and you look back, you don't hate that person who was heavier. I was just a heavier person. That was you then. The same kind of love that you have, that the love doesn't change. And that's the destructive part of some of the self-improvement movements, is that we're striving to get better and better and better. And every time we reach a new threshold, we look back and say, boy, I didn't have it together back then. Now I've got it better. And then you get better and say, boy, now I realize how unaware I was back then. But this kind of love is about being a love that's big enough to hold all of that, who you were then as well as who you are now.
Yeah. And I think Buddha has a quote that he said, you are perfect the way you are, and you have room for improvement.
Yeah.
Or something like that. I might have butchered it, but it was like that sense. Yeah. And it's like so true, right? Like, well, I just want to be mindful of the time because this session, we've gone a little bit over, and our next session starts at 5 o'clock, which is a yoga class with Susie Q. And that's so great for me because I've been sitting here all day and I need to move my body. So for everybody who's on, please stay on and join us for self-love yoga. And Dave, thank you so much again for supporting me and sharing and guiding us during this session. And always so great to see you.
Well, great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Could we thank him? Could we all thank him online?
Sure, you can unmute yourself and
Thank you, Dave Potter. I joined this week for your online course, and I'm so grateful. I've been attending the online retreat by our JKZ for the past, this is the 8th week. It's been wonderful having him giving us that retreat on Wisdom 2.0. And to hear you and to go through that meditation was wonderful. It was easier to picture my old self going to my younger self. I was like, I can totally accept that. I can bring them together, and I can just step back and see that was awesome. Thank you so much. And I didn't want to take a lot of your time, but thank you. You're a godsend for me, so thanks.
Well, thanks it's so nice to meet you this way, because I don't get to meet my online people very often. Yeah.
Right, yeah, I was thinking, I'm so grateful. Thank you, Eureka, for making it possible.
Oh, you're welcome.
And thanks for making me work and preparing this.
That wasn't my intention. I just put like on the thing, I couldn't like on the square, I couldn't type the word interview. It was too long. So I was like, hey, what's a shorter word? Talk. But it turned out to be perfect.
Yeah, and I was really happy that it forced me to do that. Yeah.
Patty asks, can you share the name of the first poem that you shared?
Oh, the first poem was.
I can put it in the chat if you want.
Love After Love.
Love After Love, yeah.
Yeah, it's Derek Walcott, WALCOTT, Love After Love. Isn't that a beautiful poem?
Dave, can I just say thank you so much for today. I've never met you before, and I'm so many things of what you shared were so helpful. I especially loved when you said the 15th take, like, as an actress, like it's like the 15th take, that's perfect, and that you don't pretend that you like what's happening, that you
Yeah.
embrace. There's my dog. So anyway, thank you so much. And how do you keep everything in your head? Like, that's incredible.
Well, I cheated. I
You
created my own teleprompter. While I was talking to you, I had my document right in front of me on the screen, and I could just scroll it up. So what I was looking at was right under the camera. So I made a teleprompter.
I'm an on-camera coach, and I didn't even notice. So congratulations, that was amazing. So,
Okay, so I'm gonna give just a few minutes for people to like run to the restroom and or change something into more comfortable for our yoga session. And again, thank you so much, David.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. It's Faith. I also took your 8-week class, and I actually grabbed my 22-year-old to come do the meditation, and he loved it. So
Oh, nice.
you've made a big difference in my life. I wrote that in the chat, and I just want to make sure you know that. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Yeah. So I need to let Eureka have her time back so she can get on with the yoga. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed being with you. I'm going to turn my picture off here for a moment, and I'll be gone in a few minutes after that. But it's been a pleasure to be with all of you.
Thank you.